Hi there, welcome to Floating in Dreams. Today's video is going to be about my decluttered eyeshadow palettes and whether I regret getting rid of them. Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. Today I have a new video for you about eyeshadow palettes that I used to own, that I decluttered, and whether I regret that decision in any sort of way, shape, or form, you could say. I am currently trying to keep tabs of all of the eyeshadow palettes I own versus all of the eyeshadow palettes I decluttered in an Excel file. So you can find the link to that in the description box down below. The declutter list isn't complete. I'm still sort of going through my decluttering videos as we speak, but if there's anything on that list that you see that makes you go, oh, why haven't you mentioned that yet? Then please let me know in a comment down below, because then of course I can try and make sure to mention it at some point. And for those of you who are new here, hi, my name is Maaike. I live in the Netherlands. I have fair skin with a cool to neutral undertone. I greatly enjoy makeup, and I have been reviewing it for more than a decade. I love eyeshadow palettes, Essence and Catrice, and getting the use out of my makeup. So if that's something you're interested in, then I hope you'd like to consider subscribing. Also, if I look super shiny and my makeup looks a little smudged, I just got home from work, and I'm sort of filming this quite late in the day, so the lighting isn't optimal, but we'll figure it out. It's fine, it's fine. It's still like October is like the final month, I think, where I can film any videos once I get home from work, that's for sure. Yeah, so if it looks a little smudged and shiny, that's why, because this has been on my face since 8 a.m. and it's now past 5. Hey! So yeah, 10 eyeshadow palettes that I decluttered that I used to own, kicking things off with a drugstore favorite that I used to love, and it's the sleek Enchanted Forest. Now, I don't think that this particular sleek palette was one that a lot of people owned. I think this was a limited edition. I used to own a lot of sleek palettes, and I'm definitely going to be mentioning all of the ones I used to own at some point in time. I know I mentioned one last time. This Enchanted Forest one is possibly the kind of palette that really made me realize how much I enjoy a warm tone, a cool tone, I should say, because it's a very cool tone palette. This is when I really started to feel that sleek eyeshadow quality wasn't necessarily the same as other brands. Definitely when I first tried sleek, they were some of the best eyeshadow I had ever tried. But as I tried more and as I really started to discover how good eyeshadow can be, sleek definitely fell a little by the wayside for me. This wasn't a bad palette by any means, but just compared to other things I had in my makeup collection, the sleek palettes just started to be a little bit wishy-washy. I also felt that the sleek quality changed over time, and that some of the earlier palettes I used to own were just so much better than some of the later ones I bought, and this was one of the later ones. Was it good? Yes. But sleek, I think, was doing something as well that just not a lot of people were appreciating at the time. They were definitely sort of outperformed by brands like Makeup Revolution and BH Cosmetics at some point, because that was all around the same price point. You can still find sleek in some places, but it's very barren, and I couldn't even find their official website anymore. So I definitely think this brand has sort of like died a very slow death here. But yeah, sleek was definitely a brand that I loved, and I loved their eyeshadow palettes for years. But do I regret decluttering this? No, because I have this thing a million times over in my makeup collection. I just know. Speaking of Makeup Revolution, the Soph palette, who remembers this? This was one of the Makeup Revolution palettes that I've kept around for some time, because Makeup Revolution as a brand as well was one of those brands where I used to own a bunch of their chocolate bars and some of the other palettes they did. And I just really started decluttering everything once I started buying more high-end makeup. Not because I didn't like it anymore, but for instance, I had the Makeup Revolution dupe for the Too Faced chocolate bar. Then I bought the chocolate bar. So did I then need both? I didn't. So that's why I ended up getting rid of quite a few of the Makeup Revolution ones over time. And I just ended up not loving Makeup Revolution quality in the end. Again, pretty hit or miss. And the Soph palette was one where I really felt the quality was definitely on point. As far as a Makeup Revolution palette went that I had in my collection, the Soph and also the Soph Extra Spice were two of the best palettes they've ever done in terms of like formula and wear time and color stories. They were definitely some of the more interesting ones. The reason why I decluttered my Soph palette was just because it was not really my color story. So as much as I thought it was a good color story for the brand, it wasn't quite what I wanted because it was a little bit warm and not all of the shades necessarily came together once I applied them. I had a lot of fun playing with it, but again, a palette that fell by the wayside in my personal collection because I just had things that performed better in color stories I preferred. And then this one was just unused in my makeup collection and it ended up being decluttered for that reason. So that's why, again, not a regret at all. Now the next one is another drugstore one. And this one, I kind of regret. But I still have its sister palette, so did I really make, no, anyways. It's the Essence Pink Glitter Show. So I still have the Silver Glitter Show from Essence, which is the silvery packaging. That looks a lot like a Stila palette. And they also did like a pinky warm tone version of the same palette. Here's the thing. I bought them because they were part of a limited edition collection that I wanted to review. So I got those palettes, tried them, really liked them. Like it's some of the best eyeshadow quality Essence has ever produced. But then at the end, I was like, this silver one I would still wear. But this pinky one with the golds, I just wouldn't see myself wearing it ever again. There were also a lot of like shimmer formulas, but not shimmer formulas in a nice way. Like it was all the same level of shimmer. We didn't get a whole lot of matte, so there wasn't a lot of dimension. And this palette was incredibly one note. Like it was like all renditions of the same sort of pinky golden tone shades. There wasn't a lot of distinction on the eyes. So I decluttered it, but put it in a makeup memory box because I was like, the packaging is just gorgeous. Like the Silver Glitter Show, it had like packaging that you could move and then the pinky sparkly things would fall down. It was really, really stunning. That's the only reason why I kind of regret that I no longer have this anywhere, because I did put it in a makeup memory box, but then my makeup memory box just started to overflow and I was like, I cannot possibly keep a hold of makeup that I like and that I think has very pretty packaging, but that doesn't really hold any sort of sentimental value for me. And this was just, one of those things I tried. It was good. It was nice. But at the end of the day, I was like, do I really need to keep this? So it very much pained me when I got rid of this because it was just such a beautiful packaged palette. Like, I wish they would do that again. But yeah, like I said, I still have the Silver Glitter Show that has similar packaging, but I actually preferred the packaging of the other one. But yeah, that one I did get rid of, and it was a stunning palette, but just not for me. Oh well, I can't keep, like if I were to store all the makeup I've ever bought just because it was pretty, I'd need an extra house, so it's not gonna happen. Another one that surprised me, but then I was like, yeah, again, I have this, and that's why I probably got rid of it. The NYX Perfect Filter All of You. I mean, NYX has just reformulated a lot of their line, which has me intrigued, because I'm like, is it now better? Because those Ultimate palettes, I've tried one or two of them, they weren't necessarily the best eyeshadow quality that NYX has ever produced. But the Perfect Filter range, that was stunning. And the All of You palette was like a cooler toned version of the ABH subculture with a slightly more curated color story. It was absolutely gorgeous. Here's the thing. I have color stories like this a million times over in my makeup collection. So did I need to keep this? No. And by now, I have other alternatives to the subculture, which I've never needed because I still love my subculture palette. I really, really do. I know it was a palette that was hated on by everyone, but I have one, I've had it for years, and mine is absolutely fine. It doesn't have any hard pan, the formula isn't weird. Is it more difficult to work with than the Modern Renaissance was? Sure, but I still very much like mine, but I have other palettes that can do what this palette did for me, which is why I decluttered it. But there is a part of me that regrets this because it was such a good example of what kind of eyeshadow NYX can actually do. So part of me wanted to still have this so that I can compare it to other things they do, but yet again, I cannot keep everything. So I think it was a good decision to get rid of it in the end, but I also kind of miss this one a little bit in my collection. Not for the color story, but definitely because of the quality, because NYX really, really aced it. We're having a lot of, I think over the years, I definitely did declutter more drugstore than I did high-end palettes, so I think these videos are going to be slightly drugstore heavy, but I have Catrice's Yellow Submagreen, which was a quad. Who remembers Catrice doing quads like this? Because this thing is ancient. That's the reason why I had to get rid of it, because this thing had been living in my makeup collection for 13 years. I never used it. Like, my brain never even went to this green color story with a yellow. Like, just never. I never wore this. But because it looks so cute and fun, I always wanted to keep it. But then I was just like, I have these kinds of greens a million times over. The yellow was a bit, like, borderline bad. Was a bit chalky, didn't blend very well. So in the end, I just decided that this wasn't worth keeping around because I try so much Essence and Catrice eyeshadow that did I really need to keep this quad around? But then again, similarly to the NYX palette actually, I just really enjoy the quality that some old Catrice quads and singles used to have. They used to do some duos that I had, and I had some singles, and they were stunning. Catrice can do amazing eyeshadow if they put their minds to it, and this is one of the examples of how good they can be. But like I mentioned, I try so much Essence and Catrice. They are always coming out with new things that it's just very easy for things to be replaced in my makeup collection. Not just eyeshadow, also like their blushes, because every 2 years they update their blush range and their lipstick ranges and whatever. It's like a never-ending story of new product coming out. And I test it all for my channel, and I don't always love everything, but very often they hit the nail on the head, and it's just better than the version they used to have. And then I always get rid of the old version, of course. So that's definitely what happened here. I have Catrice eyeshadows I just love and adore. You all know I'm talking about the falling colors here. So yeah, Yellow Submagreen. It had to go, but it still pains me a little bit that I did. And this was a palette I had completely forgotten I ever owned. And I actually feel terrible about it because this was such a stunner of a palette. The Milani Soft and Sultry. The moment in time where Milani aced it in terms of eyeshadow quality. Now I do have to say everybody was raving about how it was really affordable and it was such an amazing palette at an amazing price point. I mean, over here in Europe, Milani is marked up so terribly that the $15 eyeshadow palette that all the US YouTubers were raving about ended up costing me $27.95 or something great. Like, I paid close to twice as much money for the exact same thing. And that is the thing that always in my review, because it was so much more expensive, I mean, to me, it was like, but that's Zoeva quality. That's like borderline, you know, Too Faced, you know? It was like, it's very close to high end in its price range because of what I had to pay for it. So to me, in the end, I just didn't really feel like this palette was as good as some other cooler tone palettes I had. It wasn't as cool toned as a lot of people made it out to seem as well. It was definitely a cool tone palette that was a cool tone palette in a sea of warmth. I think if we can credit any brand for bringing cool tones back, it's Milani Soft and Sultry. But it also had quite a few shades that just didn't quite work for me. So even though I love the quality of the Milani Soft and Sultry, at the end of the day, I just didn't love what the palette did for me. and I just had other palettes I liked better. So I ended up decluttering it. Also because in my brain, it was like, for like a close to 30 euro eyeshadow palette, I just wanted more. Like the color story wasn't exciting me. It was just a little lackluster, and that just goes to show how what you pay for something can definitely factor into how you feel about something. This definitely goes into higher end palettes that I buy. I am much more likely to be disappointed in an expensive eyeshadow palette that doesn't perform well than a drugstore palette that has mediocre performance. You know what I mean? Because I haven't bought that much money, but that's also why it's easier for me to declutter drugstore things, because it wasn't that expensive. So, Huda Beauty, Amethyst Obsessions. And this is one where I'm like, yeah, I did a good job decluttering that one. I really didn't need it in my life. These were, of course, the Obsessions palette that got the entire mini palette range from Huda Beauty started. It was part of that first batch. They had this jewel, sort of like precious stone theme to them. And then, of course, we got lots of other themes that the brand explored. But you had a couple of these, and I owned a couple of those color stories. And I think the only one I've kept around over time is the green one. I also had the blue, the rainbow, and then this purple one. And the purple one for me wasn't purple enough. And that's why I ended up decluttering it. The Huda Beauty Amethyst Obsessions suffered from what most ColourPop purple palettes suffer from. That it's not very blue purple. I love a blue toned leaning purple rather than a red toned leaning purple, and this was very reddish toned. It had some weird pinks in there. It even had some shades that looked nearly identical to each other once you put them on the face. And for a 9 pan, I just wanted more. The only reason why this survived in my collection for such a long time was because it was Huda Beauty, and I didn't have anything that was like a really good purple palette to replace this. But I've built purple palettes out of my ColourPop color stories over the years. I have a couple of purple palettes from other brands that I do really enjoy, like the Viseart Violette Étendue, and also some Glam Shops things that I've come into. So I'm good on the purple front, which is why this palette, even though it was never perfect from the start, did like, I kept it around for a while just because I didn't have anything else that really could compete with it. But yeah, I don't regret decluttering it because it was a disappointment from the start. The BH Cosmetics Royal Affair, another one where I was like, oh yeah, I used to own it. I decluttered it and I gave it away to Erica Conger here on YouTube. She has a YouTube channel and it was her favorite palette and she had Hit Pan in all the shades. And this was limited edition. I was like, look, I'm getting rid of mine. Do you want it? And I sent it to her because she was in love with it. And this, I think this was my first BH palette, and I bought it at a moment in time. And to anyone who's only been watching my channel recently, you're gonna be surprised, but I bought a neutral tone palette at a moment in time where I was all about the colorful things. I wasn't loving neutrals at all when I bought this. So I wasn't reaching for this. I didn't think about this. Even though I liked the quality, I just felt like it was another neutral palette, which I already had a million times over in my collection. It had a couple of very interesting shades. It had some taupes. It had this limey green shade that really made the palette pop. So that's why I hung on to it. And then I had initially decluttered it, took it out of my declutter pile, and I kept it around for another year or two before I eventually decided to get rid of it. So yeah, the BH Cosmetics Royal Affair is the one that introduced me to BH, but I bought other BH things that I liked better, and in a sea of neutral tones, it just wasn't quite right for me. So I don't regret decluttering this. I was very happy that I was able to make somebody else happy with that palette after my very light use of these palettes. Then, an oldie but a goodie. And if you remember this one, you've been around. Because did you know that ABH did eyeshadow palettes before the Modern Renaissance series came out? Those velvety ones? They did eyeshadow palettes before it. And no, I'm not talking about Makeup by Mario, not that palette. I'm talking about the World Traveler palette. Who remembers these? They had this whole range. I think there was also an Amrezy palette, and they had a couple of them. And I think this was my first experience with ABH eyeshadow. And then, of course, we got the boom with the modern renaissance and the subculture and everything that came after it. So the ABH World Traveler, I think I must have picked this up on a trip, which is the only reason why it stayed in my collection for a long time. Because I think that if I had bought this not like anywhere that wasn't a trip, I don't think it would have lasted that long. Because I felt this color story didn't quite come together for me. So, do I regret this? Not at all. I had completely forgotten I had this until I saw my own video, and I was like, wait, what? I used to own that ABH palette. I had completely forgotten it. But yeah, this color story wasn't quite right. None of the shades really came together. Like, you couldn't really make very effortless color combinations across the palette. It had a few really beautiful shades, but at the end of the day, it just wasn't perfect enough, and I got rid of it. And then last but not least, the final palette we need to mention is the Colored Rain Queen of Hearts. So this palette blew up at the end of 2016, and I had completely missed it. And I don't know how. I think I just watched slightly other creators than the people who were raving about this. But all of a sudden, it was in everybody's end-of-year favorites, and everybody was loving it. And then I was able to find it. There used to be, the town I used to live in, had this little hole-in-a-wall makeup shop that I would always go to, because they were selling all of these indie brands that you couldn't find anywhere else. They didn't survive the pandemic, so they went bankrupt, and they haven't had a store since, which is a shame, because it was a great way to get your hands on some products if you were in the Netherlands. People would actually travel from around the country to this one place, and that's where I picked up the Queen of Hearts. I'm pretty certain that's where I picked it up. Maybe I picked it up from Beauty Bay. I'm not sure anymore, but I think it was that little hole-in-the-wall store, or there I was able to swatch it. I think it was that. And this had, again, some really, really stunning shades. But the purple in it was useless. Everything else was warm toned. So this is one of the palettes, I think, that really started my journey into knowing exactly what I want out of a palette. And I just knew this wasn't it. I bought it because of the hype, and then I felt a huge letdown. I ended up keeping it around for a couple of years because of one or two shades. It had this really nice, like, mauve-y, silvery sparkle. That was my favorite shade, and that is a shade where I'm like, should have taken it out and putting it in my single shadow collection for sure. But I didn't do that at the time just yet, so just that one shade I'm kind of missing. But I've also come to the conclusion that keeping an eyeshadow palette around for just one shade is not a good enough reason to keep it around. And I wasn't going to be using the rest of the palette. So that's why I ended up decluttering it. Was this a pretty palette? Yes. If you loved warm tones, then this one was an absolutely stunning palette to own, but it wasn't quite right for me. So I do not regret decluttering this one. Thank you so very much for joining me, because on that note, we've come to the end of the video. Let me know in a comment down below if you've ever owned any of these palettes and how you feel about them. Maybe you're still using the Queen of Hearts every single day and you love it. Who knows? I personally got rid of mine, and I just explained to you why. So thank you so very much for joining me today. Thumbs up the video if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more by me. I make several videos every single week, so if you'd like to stay tuned for more, and then I hope to see you in my next one. Bye-bye!